Good morning, everyone. If we could go to the next slide, please. So for those not familiar with Tensoft, I'm not going to cover all these items. I think the key things are really that we've been around since 1996. We've had a semiconductor industry focus since 2000 and a cloud computing focus since 2006. And that we've worked with over 50 semiconductor companies directly, and we have supported 100 or so companies directly or indirectly through business process outsourcers or other types of means. And so we are deeply committed to the semiconductor industry, both the user community around the industry as well as our software and functionality for that industry. So we're really pleased to sponsor today's event and to be part of knowledge experts and knowledge transfer to the industry. Next slide, please. Just going to talk about one brief thing in our product that relates to today, and it might just tick off some ideas as you're listening to Ron's thought about what today's topic applies to your systems and how you do business. If we look across the top, we have fab, probe, assembly, test, pack, a sort of a general semiconductor flow and outline. And in an outsourced model, of course, we're outsourcing and moving the materials, and the lots are, continually moving. One of the things that our terminology, that you may have own terminology for your own system, is really we have the ability to collect attributes at every step of the process. And attributes are general information that can be in different categories, like build instructions, like production lots, like product configuration, like production specs. And they're really an unlimited number of data variables for every stage of the process. And so when Ron talks about conflict materials today and about different places in the manufacturing process where the conflict minerals can be involved, then you really are going to need, this is sort of the thing that allows you to track steps in the production process and where different types of minerals impact your final product configuration. We could go to the next slide, please. And it's my pleasure to introduce Ron Jones. He has an impressive experience and resume. So over 17 years with the Enable Group CEO, and really with a large commitment to the semiconductor operations, systems, team development, team augmentation, and just general expertise about the conflict minerals and compliance. And previous experience includes CEO and co-founder, Chairman Emeritus of Silicon Border, CEO of Thai Microsystems in Bangkok, President of Indie-Olin Interconnect Technologies in California, Corporate VP of Worldwide Operations, General Manager at Amcor, VP of Operations at RF Monolithics, and significant foundry and operations management at Texas Instruments at the start of his career. He has both a BS in metallurgical engineering and an MS in electrical engineering. And so really the right person to address the topic today. And he's got some great thoughts both on the nature of the challenge and some efficient ways to address it. So if we could do the next slide, please. It's been my privilege to look ahead a little bit on Ron's slide. And Ron, if you want to jump in with me here and so on, the intro to your stuff. But really, when I looked through his content, I was thinking about the legal requirement for business, that this impacts, even if it doesn't impact you for direct reporting, it impacts how you do business, that it hasn't gone away, even though people have maybe hoped that it would, that it's really going to be a significant challenge in terms of the documentation and the effort required to do it. And then really Ron has come up with something that says, here's really the way to help. This is some specific things. So Ron, I know this is maybe prior to your slide, if you want to cover the overview today, and pleased to turn it over to you and to let you, I think everybody can look forward to a good presentation today.
Thanks, Bob. I think I'll just go ahead and dive in. We could talk about what I'm going to talk about, but it's probably easier and more straightforward just to dive in. So today, if you're not here to listen about conflict minerals, you're on the wrong website. So this is going to be a lot of general information about conflict minerals that will be background for everybody, and then there will be some semiconductor specific stuff because we really are aimed at a semiconductor audience. So no matter where you are, you'll learn something today, hopefully. Before we start into the main part of it, Krista, would you please queue up the first question? Because of the CPE credit, we're going to have 4 questions. And the first one has to do with what segment each of you attendees belong to. So OEM would be like the Apples or whatever. If you work for a fabless or IDM semiconductor company, a foundry or OSAT, and if you're not in the actual semiconductor chain, if you're a consultant or software, and then if you're other, just go ahead and check that. So if you would do that quickly, we will move into the presentation. Okay, so let me start by giving you a statement of the problem. And I'm going to read this a bit, but I'll comment along the way. There's an enormous amount of profits being generated by conflict minerals found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is abbreviated DRC. And those have supported conflict, human rights violations, and labor and environmental abuses in that region for years. And it's not just the DRC, it's the surrounding areas. So companies that use minerals in their products have decided that they want to do something about that. And these are called downstream companies. They're concerned about the abuses, and they're taking action to avoid contributing to the conflict. And the U.S., in its inimitable way, is helping with legislation and regulations. So what you may have heard in the last week or week and a half is there was sort of a breakthrough in the DRC in early November, just about 10 days ago. The March 23rd movement, or M23 as it's called, laid down their weapons to seek a peaceful solution. So this was one of the major groups that was fighting against the Congolian government. This did not signal the end of conflict in the Congo. The M23 was only in existence for 20 months. It didn't create any of the conflict mineral problems, and there still remain 50-plus armed groups in the Congo and the surrounding areas, ranging in size from multiple thousands of armed people down to dozens that are involved in the conflict minerals problem. So a little background, the DRC and the 9 adjoining states are called the conflict countries region. The DRC itself, just the single country, has an area of 900,000 square miles. That's the size of Texas and Alaska combined. So imagine you're trying to cure an ailment in something that size. The DRC plus 9 is actually the size of the United States. So it's a huge area. There's a population in the DRC of 75 million people, and these are among the poorest in the world. In contrast, the mineral reserves in the DRC alone is $24 trillion. That's with a T, and is the richest of any country. Civil war has been going on for 15 years. Death rate through 2008, which was the last official count, was over 5 million, and the death rate currently is over 100,000 people a month. Now, this is not all due to conflict. It's due to starvation and disease and things like that, but the problem is exacerbated by the fact that people are manipulating the population to make money off conflict minerals. So what is the definition of a conflict mineral? The term conflict mineral includes both the ores and the elements themselves. So regardless of source, and I'll explain what that means. So if you look at the 4, cassiterite, columbite, gold, wolframite, those you would more typically recognize in their refined form, which is tin, tantalum, gold, and tungsten. So regardless of source, if you walked out in your backyard and you found a chunk of cassiterite, that would be a conflict mineral. Now, you may be thousands of miles away from the DRC, but that is still in the definition of the government legislation, that is a conflict mineral. So if your products contain any of those elements, tin, tantalum, gold, or tungsten, you have conflict minerals in your product. Conflict minerals are basically inescapable in ICs, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. Virtually every IC product contains one or more of the elements on the CM list. If you look down, tantalum typically gets used as a barrier level in a wafer fab in the form of tantalum nitride. Tin in the wafer fab with wafer bumps for flip chip bonding. Tungsten, sputtered tungsten or titungsten, vapor deposited tungsten hexafluoride, gold and sputtered gold wafer bumps, and the same type of thing over on the packaging side. Bond wire, gold bond wire is used in a majority of products, but there's also gold in ceramic packages, and there's tin in almost every kind of lead finish that you can think of. And there is no de minimis escape clause here. If you sputter down one atomic layer of tungsten onto a silicon wafer, you now have tungsten on the wafer. So there's no minimum threshold before it becomes countable. So conflict minerals legislation, before we step into this one, Kristen, let's take our second question. This is on the conflict mineral process at your company. And these are sort of in steps, whether you've started your policy, developed a system, requested or received forms, etc. So if you could take just a moment and answer those, you can answer more than one, or yes in more than one category. Okay, so what is driving this whole thing? A couple of years ago, the United States government, the Congress, passed the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Customer Protection Act of 2010. That's a long title. Conflict minerals has literally nothing to do with that. This was a rider that was tacked on in Section 1502, but it is law. And what it basically says is that there are some actions that are going to be taken to try to manage the conflict minerals problem. This was turned over to the Securities and Exchange Commission, who issued a final rule last year on compliance with Section 1502. And this is pretty typical. The Dodd-Frank Section 1502 was a few pages. The SEC managed to turn that into 356 pages. And it also states that you have to use an internationally recognized guide for doing this, and that has been selected to be the OECD due diligence guidance. You don't really need to know that, although that's just another 97 pages of documentation that says how you have to do this. So the Dodd-Frank section, if you step back, it basically says that any public company, any U.S. public company, if you have tantalum, tungsten, tin, or gold in your product, you have to determine if those conflict minerals came from the Democratic Republic of the Congo or the 9 surrounding countries. Now, on the surface, that may not sound too bad, but it gets pretty complex in a hurry. So there's all kinds of things, and I'm not going to go through these details. I'm going to give you a summary, but you're going to hear terms like RCOI, which is Reasonable Country of Origin Inquiry, and DD for due diligence. We're going to talk about the OECD framework. We're going to talk about whether or not you require an audit. One of the most important things we'll talk about is the fact that you have to report products, not supply chain. And then we'll also talk about requirements for filing with the SEC. So this is the Cliff's Notes version of what I've just said. If you're a public company and your product contains tantalum, tin, tungsten, or gold, which are the conflict minerals, you must file with the SEC. The detail and volume of what you must file depends on several other factors, which we'll talk about. You must determine the source of each conflict mineral, reasonable country of origin inquiry is what that's called, or RCOI. If any of those are from the DRC plus 9, that's the DRC plus the 9 countries that directly touch the DRC, or you can't prove the source, you must do a much more detailed due diligence process. I'll talk about what that is, but it can get pretty excruciating. You must use a commonly accepted process for RCOI and DD. That's the OECD guidelines. Most companies will require a third-party audit, an independent third-party audit, and I'll talk about who those are. You must report by product, not supply chain, and you must file each year by May 31st for the previous year. So there was a potential stay of execution right after the SEC published their final ruling. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the National Association of Manufacturers asked the U.S. Court of Appeals to set it aside. July 23rd of this year, they came back and said, no, there's no set aside. You have to continue on. And so what a lot of companies had hoped for did not happen, and now everybody is in a catch-up mode trying to figure out what they have to do to be compliant. So the general timeline, we're currently in the latter part of November 2013, and the first compliance year is calendar year 2013. The filing for that has to be made May 31st of 2014. So in all cases, you have to file with the SEC, if you do have to file, by May 31st of the year following the compliance year. Right now, we're at 6 months and 11 days and counting. So this is not a one-time deal. You must be reported each year. The expectation is that if you don't get it perfect this time, you will refine your due diligence over time and you'll get better at it and have a higher level of coverage. Some of the things that make it not as simple as it might seem is compliance documents are good for a year, and so they expire and need renewal. And then there's always changes in the supply chain. Vendors change, mines are added, etc. So it's not a one-shot deal, it's ongoing. This requirement's not going away. As a matter of fact, it will probably grow. So now that the door is open, the industry's been broken to the bit of providing this information, there's open for additions. It could be rubidium from Rwanda, selenium from Slovakia, palladium from Paraguay, rare earths from China. It doesn't have to be from the DRC plus 9. If there's a discovery that some particular thing, a different mineral is in Argentina and it's causing problems with abuses, that can be added to the list. And the only thing it requires to be added to the list is the U.S. State Department declares it to be a conflict mineral, and all of the legislation is in place, both in the Congress and the SEC, to add it, and all of a sudden it becomes an additional reporting requirement. And before you think this is a small task, the common estimates are that the current 3TG, that's the 3 Ts and gold minerals, will still not be in total control within 10 years. So who must file with the SEC? This gets down to, sort of where the rubber meets the road. Okay, generally any company that files reports with the SEC under 13A or 15D and for which conflict mineral is necessary to the function of your product must be reported. So this likely covers all public companies that sell electronic products. So this would be like the Apples, the Dells, the Hewlett-Packards, all public semiconductor companies, public foundries and OSATs, and suppliers of conflict mineral inclusive materials like sputtering targets and things like that. And filing is done with the SEC on forms SD and CMR, which we'll talk about. So if you're a private company, you think, well, I'm off the hook. I don't have to do anything. But any private company in the semiconductor supply chain that has those same conflict minerals in their products probably is going to have to do the work even though they won't have to file. So this likely includes private semiconductor companies, foundries and OSATs, and suppliers of conflict mineral inclusive materials. So why would they have to do the work? So although a private company doesn't have to file, they are in the supply chain of the public companies that do have to file. And so for Apple to be able to trace down to a smelter or refiner, they're going to have to go through both public and private semiconductor companies to get the answer that they're looking for. And so that's why private companies will end up having to do the work also. So this is the diagram in the SEC document, which has a whole bunch of ins and outs and this and that. I'm going to boil it down to something simpler that's sort of the process that you go through to evaluate. So the decision tree on the left, if you're a private company or your product does not contain tantalum, tungsten, tin, or gold, you're scot-free. You're off the hook. You don't have to file anything with the SEC. If your product does include that, you have to go through what's called an RCOI, or Reasonable Country of Origin Inquiry. And if you can go through and prove that every one of your products do not have materials that were sourced in the DRC +9, you still have to file with the SEC, but it's a very simple filing. If you determine that, yes, some of the materials may have come from the DRC, or that you can't determine where they came from, then you have to do a much more in-depth due diligence process and come down to a conclusion of, on a product-by-product basis, they're either conflict mineral free, they're not conflict mineral free, or you can't make a determination. And depending on that, you have to file different levels of paperwork with the SEC. So if you take an IDM or a fabless company, and let's say they're using 2 foundries and 2 assembly subcontractors, and they're buying products from those, going through a wafer foundry, there's typically like 6 places where conflict minerals might come into a fairly sophisticated wafer. This might be a microprocessor or an ASIC or something like that, and it comes in the form of titanium tungsten sputtered layers, maybe from a couple of different sources, or tantalum nitride, or processed gases, etc. So just with 6 each, that means there's 24 RCOI chains that you need to run to ground. Imagine now that we've got people that we're talking to that have 10 foundries they're using and 10 assembly test subcontractors. So you multiply that, and it can turn into scores or hundreds of chains that you need to track. Now, there is good news, because the semiconductor supply chain uses a lot of the same manufacturing companies. A lot of people use TSMC or Global Foundries or ASE or Amkor. So there is leverage. By working at this from an industry level, there's a lot of leverage to keep companies from having to do every bit of the work themselves. So today, if you're a fabless company, let's say your customer's contract, let's say it's with Apple or Dell or whoever, has a clause in there that says that you will not supply them product that have conflict materials. But you're not really sure if you're compliant, but you do go ahead and sign the contract so that you can get the business. If anything, you might have a breach of contract. Tomorrow, the situation changes. You do an analysis on your supply chain, you file a document with the SEC, and if it's accurate, there may be some major consequences. Sorry, I got a bit of a cough. So the implications of not filing or filing a perjurious report: first of all, you must file with the SEC, not furnish. Now, the implication of filing is that opens you to Article 18 of the SEC Code, which means that there are significantly broader liabilities. Your company could potentially be penalized by the SEC, or people could actually go to jail over this. We don't think anything like that's going to happen, particularly in the early years, but it is allowed for in the legislation. A customer may move you to a backup supplier status. Companies like Apple and Dell are very serious about this, and if you're not taking the thing seriously or you're not doing your part to help them show that they are conflict-free, they may move you to a backup supplier if they have second source availability. Private companies, you don't have to file with the SEC, but you do need to provide information to public companies. And if you do provide information to public companies and it is perjurious, you could open yourself to the same kinds of things, penalties or incarceration. Now, a key point is, we've been talking about supply chain stuff here. Though RCOI and due diligence efforts tend to have a supply chain orientation, reporting is product focused. So for a fabless company, a product is an integrated circuit. For a wafer foundry, it's a processed wafer. For an OSAT, it is a packaged assembled unit. So that's the reporting focus that you have to do, not on the supply chain itself. We'll talk a little more about this, but it makes it to where you probably don't want to lump all of your products into one big bucket, because if there's one product in there that is either non-compliant or undeterminable, it sort of poisons the whole bucket, and the whole bucket would have to be reported that way. So the allowed declarations, well, first of all, there's no requirement to become conflict-free. So you can sort of thumb your nose at the whole thing and say, look, I don't believe in this. I'm not going to become conflict-free. And that's your choice. However, if you're a public company, there is a requirement to file with the SEC, and that is required no matter what your feelings are about the law. So the things that you can file, or the declarations you can make, is that a product is conflict-free, not conflict-free, or conflict undeterminable. So for conflict-free, you can make that declaration anytime, this year, next year, the following year, and the same with not conflict-free. You can only choose the undeterminable category for the next 2 years, and then after that, you're going to have to own up and either declare it as conflict-free or non-conflict-free. And remember, this is on a product basis. So this is a very busy FOIL, and basically says, can I just declare things to be undeterminable, and be compliant? Yes, you can, but that doesn't get you out of the work. You still have to do all of the RCOI work, due diligence, and you have to document that, and you run the risk of becoming very unpopular with your customers who are trying to carry out a conflict mineral management system. So the forms you would file, typically as a public company, a Form SD, which is a specialized disclosure, and it's which one of your products fit in each of the categories. Not only that, but you have to describe the RCOI and due diligence efforts that you went through. So you not only have to say what you found, but the procedure you used and also the results of that procedure. If you have to go into the due diligence chain, there's a lot more work that has to be done, which means that you do have something from the DRC or the 9 surrounding countries, and you have to go through a much more detailed analysis to make sure that it's not coming from smelters or whatever that have illegal or unethical practices, etc., and you have to drive it down to the mine or origin with the greatest possible specificity. So on the surface, you'd say, well, I just want to make sure that I don't source anything from the DRC plus 9. Well, that would not be a good thing for the people in the DRC, because that would cut them off from any income and make their status as a poor country even worse. What we do want to do is manage that to where we get the conflicted things corrected and be able to use products from those mines and smelters that are conflict-free. An audit is something that you may or may not have to do. If you're a public company, it will typically be required for each year unless you're absolutely positive that no minerals originated in the DRC +9. If you're not sure or any did, you have to do an audit. And those may be skipped in year 1 and 2 if your determination is undeterminable, but eventually you will have to do it. Now, this is not an audit of what was actually found. This is an audit similar to an ISO audit. ISO is say what you do what you say. So this kind of an audit says that you had the correct procedures in place and the correct processes to do RCOI and due diligence. It is not designed to actually verify the content. So this is a fairly simple audit, shouldn't be too expensive, but it is key that you do your RCOI and due diligence properly so that it is easy to audit. So what's a conflict-free IC? Integrated circuits basically all have a chip and a package. So if the chip is conflict-free and the package is conflict-free, then the product can be conflict-free. Beyond that, any other combination means that you're not going to be conflict-free. So if your die is conflict-free but your package is not, then the overall finished product is not conflict-free, and so on down through. So to be able to declare a product as conflict-free, you need to have both the die and the package conflict-free. So now for Krista, if you would, let's queue up the third question. And this is for when you're providing information to your customers. If you don't expect to provide information at all, check box 1. If you're going to do it sometime this quarter, box 2, sometime in the first quarter, or after the first quarter. Okay, so the approach that sort of the world is using on this is to use the smelters or refiners as the choke point for this control. So at the top you've got iPhones or whatever, at the bottom you've got mines. Instead of trying to control everything top to bottom, you're trying to make the smelters and refiners the choke point. Now below the smelters and refiners you get companies or groups that move the materials from the mines. You get the mines themselves, but what we're trying to do is to control the smelters and refiners, and if we can determine what's conflict-free there, then that takes care of itself going up the chain. So who are the key players? So it's you. If you're a fabless company, it's you. You could be a foundry, you could be whatever. It's your supply chain down to the smelters and refiners. It's up the supply chain to your customers. It's the SEC if you're a public company, and who are the auditors could be a key part. So in this graphic, we've got, let's start with the block in the center, one level down, the fabless and IDM. So fabless companies or IDMs typically build their dies in foundries or fabs, and they do their packaging either in an outsourced semiconductor assembly test operation or their own captive factory. So that would be, for a fabless company, the foundry would be a tier 1 level, one level down from themselves. So that might be TSMC. More specifically, it might be TSMC Fab 14. Below that, you've got the tier 2 level. So this would be Air Products that might be the supplier of tungsten hexafluoride process gas, which even though it's a gas, it includes tungsten, and it will be deposited on the surface of the wafer, so it's a conflict material. Below that is tungstar, which is a smelter or refiner. And below that is the mine level, Saxony number 6. So you can see that there's a flow, and from top to bottom, it's not too far. You've got the fabless company, you've got the foundry, and you've got the material supplier. If you think how much simpler this is than, say, a Boeing, where you've got a 747 and it has maybe 7 to 10 layers in the bill of materials, we have a simpler situation in the semiconductor industry than others do. We have some complexities of our own, however, that make it difficult. So we have a relatively flat supply chain. But going up, the fabless company has to file with the SEC if they're public, or they have to provide information to Apple or to, say, Flextronics, which is an EMC, electronic supplier that maybe do custom bills for other electronics companies. So there's the do-it-yourself approach, and I'm using fabless here as an example, but each fabless company would work with their supply chain partners, foundries and OSATs, and others down to the smelter or refiner level. Each company would have to become an expert in conflict minerals procedures and regulations. Each company must develop some sort of tracking system to keep up with all this information, and they would, in essence, be replicating the work of scores of other fabless and IDM companies. So the internal process flow, we won't go through all these, but it's a many-step process. You have to write documentation, you have to write company policies, you have to set up some sort of a tracking system to keep up with the different levels in the structure and all the documents and expiration dates. You have to contact your Tier 1 suppliers, then you have to contact your Tier 2 suppliers, your Tier 3 suppliers. You have to follow up if they're not providing information. You have to keep all the information. Then as you get enough information, you can start doing the RCOI inquiries on the various chains. You start the documentation of your due diligence work. You potentially line up an independent audit firm and have them audit your results, and then you file with the SEC on forms SD and CMR by May 31st. So the long and the short of it is, this is time-consuming, it's a non-core competency, and it's a non-value add. So just in what you have to learn to be able to do this, you need to review the Dodd-Frank Section 1502, the conflict minerals final ruling, which is 356 pages, the OECD guidelines. There's all kinds of other documentation. There's the EICC GESI conflict templates and instructions, and then all of the big four consulting companies, as well as a lot of other companies, the PwCs, KPMGs, etc., all have lots of documentation of how they can help you figure out what needs to be done. So there's a whole bunch of stuff to do, and we talked about this before. There's a real crunch. The public filing date for calendar year 2013 is less than 7 months away. But that's not the major issue. Public customers need to supply the supply chain information, or public customers need the supply chain information from their suppliers, be they public or private, much sooner to support their own audits and filings. So you can't wait until May 31st to give information to Apple and expect them to be able to file on May 31st. Those people are already beginning to ask for information, and so as time goes by, that's going to get more and more urgent. But individual companies working independently is very inefficient, both from an overlapping expended effort and a long serial timeline. So there are some better ways to do this. Estimate of how much work, depending on whether you're public or private, depending on whether you're small or large, depending on the complexity of your supply chain. The answer basically is it depends, but it's significant. There's almost no trivial work to do on conflict minerals, even for a relatively small company. And it gets very, very big and very complex as the size of your company and supply chain grow. So what Enable Group does is offer a service to take most of this load off of you. The solution is based on a commercial cloud-based package specifically designed for conflict mineral management. And this is key because it provides the single single repository for myriad data that has to be collected, assembled, analyzed, and reported. Enable Group sets up your supply chain in that package. We work with the foundries and the OSATs and their partners down to the smelter refiner level so that you don't have to. We approach all tiers in parallel. So instead of going down to the foundries, waiting for their inputs, and then going down to the material suppliers, waiting for the inputs, then going down to the smelters and refiners, we approach all those in parallel because of the nature of the semiconductor supply chain. We can take a holistic view because we know what that semiconductor supply chain looks like, and I'll give you an example in a second. And the results can be shared among many fabless companies, thus leveraging the effort and reducing cost. And we do understand semiconductor operations. So if you looked at semiconductor supply chain, the upper left-hand corner, you see fab, probe, assembly, test. We don't have to worry about probe. We don't have to worry about test because there's no value add or there's no direct materials added there. So that narrows us down to fab and assembly. And beyond that, we don't have to look at all fab and assembly. In fab, you've got direct materials that are non-conflict, so you don't have to worry about silicon wafers or copper or aluminum metallization. You don't have to worry about indirect materials like photomasks or equipment like ion implanters. On the assembly side, you don't have to worry about alloy 42 lead frames or silver-filled epoxy because those are not conflict minerals. And you don't have to worry about probe cards or wire bonders. What you can focus on are the direct materials that are conflict. And that's tungsten or gold, sputtering targets, for instance, or tungsten hexafluoride process gases. On the assembly side, it could be gold wire, gold wafer bumps, or tin silver lead finish, or solder balls. And we're working with a number of organizations down at the materials level to start corralling all that information. We're also working with the foundries and the OSATs. So at this point, I'd like to do our last embedded question, Krista. The level of effort you estimate you will need to handle conflict minerals requirements at your company. Okay, so the conflict minerals database that we're using really is a key factor in this, in that it provides a single repository and a lot of leverage. So it is the backbone of conflict minerals management. It's cloud-based with worldwide access. So this is a key feature in that if you're a company and you have operations in the U.S., in Asia, in Europe, or whatever, anybody in your company with a browser can log in and look at the status of all of this. It comprehends the supply chain from top to bottom, so you can put your customers in. You've got your operations. You've got your foundries, your OSATs, etc., and rippling down or waterfalling down from there, their suppliers. You can put in the smelters and refiners, etc. So it comprehends the entire supply chain. It provides a central repository for all the data, documents, expiration dates, contact information for your suppliers, a history of the communication notification structure, basically everything for managing conflict mineral compliance. It provides the mechanism for documenting your RCOI and due diligence processes. It tracks fab and assembly independently, thus enabling a product level analysis. And just as importantly as the single year, because you probably aren't going to get things perfect the first year, it enables you to track progress year to year. You can see what you did in the first reporting year, what you did in the second reporting year, and show that you're making progress against a maybe unachievable but perfect target. So Enable Group support What we do is consulting, just as a consulting on conflict minerals, all the way up to a total project management for conflict mineral compliance. So this would be a total turnkey. We would start off with an assessment of where you are and where you need to go and develop a plan, support drafting a conflict minerals policy. If you don't have one, set up the supply chain and user training. User training for the software. You're not going to actually be having to do any of the work, but we want you to be able to see how to go in and look at what's going on and what the status of everything is. We'll take care of contacting key suppliers at all levels, logging of all supplier data into the database, perform the reasonable country of origin inquiry, and based on that, any due diligence processes that have to be carried out. Work with you to develop a product level reporting strategy that maximizes your level of compliance and help you with auditor selection if required. We can also take care of doing the putting together the filings to file with the SEC. So what we believe are the strengths of this approach is it provides you with a single point of responsibility for your compliance efforts. It eliminates the need for you adding headcount or dilution of your current staff efforts. It utilizes software that is specifically designed for conflict mineral management and leverages work with all tiers across the entire supply chain, making the efforts of individuals much less. And that's coupled with a deep understanding of the semiconductor space and requirements. So at this point, that's the end of my presentation. What I'd like to do is to open it up. I need to get a little help here from my helper, Caprice. And if you have questions, please submit them through the tool. I'm going to get out of the way here. Hang on just a second. We're working on things. So one of the questions we get asked a lot, particularly by private companies, is really how important is it, since I don't have to file and I'm not going to be held legally accountable for it, how important is it for me to do at least the RCOI and due diligence effort that the public companies have to do? And that sort of comes down to an issue of what kind of customers do you have and how serious are they about conflict minerals. I can say that in conversations with a number of the big OEMs, the Apples, the Dells, the HPs, they are very, very serious about this. They really want to make a positive impact. They know that it can't be perfect at the beginning, but for them to do what they need to do, they need to have the cooperation of their public and private partners down the supply chain. And so there is a real situation. I mean, if you're a single source provider of a part, they may have no other choice. But if you provide parts that are second sourced and you decided not to do sort of your part in this overall thing, you could find yourself moved down on the approved vendor list to a second source. Okay, here's a question. We are a small but public company, not SEC regulated. Do we still have to file with the SEC? Okay, I'm not sure how to answer this. If you're a public company on a different exchange, then you would not have to file. The fact that you're a public company, but you don't have to, you're not SEC regulated, I don't know how to answer that question. Again, the only thing I can think of is that maybe you're a public company on a different exchange. But if you are an American company or a foreign company like that has ADRs or whatever on the U.S. exchanges, you're still required to file. If you're a private company, I think I answered that question already. This comes down to how do you want to be viewed by your customers and what are the risks you're willing to take to not do the work to support your public customers who are supporting this overall initiative. As a distributor, I won't say you're off the hook, but if you look at the conflict mineral statements, the policies of the big distributors, they're pretty open about the fact that they've got thousands or tens of thousands of products, and they're going to do their best, but it's pretty unreasonable to expect somebody with 10,000 items of capacitors and different integrated circuits and, you know, different pieces of equipment, etc., to be able to do the same job. So I think what you have to do is you have to file and probably say it's undeterminable. And one thing about the filing is that literally no company has filed yet because the deadline is May 31st. A lot of things will become much clearer, and these are public filings. And not only do you have to file, but you also have to put your filing documents on your corporate website. So a lot of this is going to flesh out over time as May 31st comes and goes, and people are allowed to look at the filings to see, you know, what a Hallmark or somebody like that is doing, what a distributor is doing, or what the big guys are doing. A question we've got is, will the SEC accept the EICC template? The EICC -JESI template is the preferred method to gather information. The rub here comes that that template, if you got it just from your Tier 1 suppliers, they have to report down to the smelter level. So they could say they're totally compliant at all levels. So you have two choices at that point. You can take the simplest approach and say, I'm going to believe these people and I'm going to declare that I'm conflict-free, or you can do what the SEC requirements say that you're supposed to do, which is to do a reasonable country of origin inquiry and go down and test those things and see if there really is compliance all the way down. And what you typically find is, to use a term we used to use in college, a lot of this information was dry labbed. So people said that it was compliant. They sort of took a blind eye, and that's a risk I can't tell you how to play. But the EICC JESI templates are the backbone of it, but you're supposed to go down within that and look and see if the stuff looks real. And if it's not, then you dig deeper. There was one of the people asked a question on LinkedIn, if there's no conflict, is there still conflict minerals? And this is based on the announcement that the M23 had laid down their arms. And if you look at the chain of that, it basically, there were a lot of points made, but basically I think the key points are ones that I made in my second or third foil. The fact that M23 laid down their arms doesn't make conflict minerals go away. They weren't responsible for the conflict because they're only 20 months, their total lifetime was 20 months. They weren't responsible for it, and when they laid down their arms, there's still 50-plus armed camps that really are heavily involved in the conflict minerals and are creating the problems that are going to be around for a long, long time. One question related to gold. There are some special allowances that mainly hit gold because gold is so precious and it's easy to refine. There are outs. So if you use, I said refined, I meant recycled. if you use recycled gold, there's basically an out that you don't have to trace it back, because you can't tell a conflicted gold atom from a non-conflicted gold atom. So there are several places in that sort of complex SEC flow chart that I showed where there are allowances for things that were outside the supply chain before the compliance year began, for things that are recycled. You recycle gold a lot. You don't typically recycle tungsten. You could recycle tantalum. Another point is that not all of the smelters and refiners really have programs in place yet. So tantalum is the furthest along, and tantalum is used in lots of capacitors. So there's a list of a lot of tantalum smelters and refiners. The list for the other things are much, much shorter. So that's something that will be evolving over time. Here's a question. Is anyone having trouble with EICC GESI templates in trying to upload those? That's one. It depends on what you're trying to upload it to. And an EICC GESI template is really nothing but an Excel spreadsheet. It's a smart one, but it's really nothing but an Excel spreadsheet. In the product we use, this conflict minerals database, you can automatically upload the EICC GESI templates. The software goes in and rips the answers on that and puts the information in a database, so you have all the templates in a database that you can query, you can sort, you can do all kinds of analyses on. So, but basically having trouble uploading it means that you're having trouble uploading an Excel spreadsheet, and that should be a soluble problem. For those of you who are associated with the GSA, I've written an article for the fourth quarter forum, which will come out, I think, December 7th or 16th, something like that. It's an article on conflict minerals with a lot of the whys and wherefores, what you do, etc. And so that will be coming out and will be available through the GSA. I will be doing a number of other webinars over the next couple of months, as well as issuing a paper, a similar paper in the MEPTEC newsletter if you happen to be a member of MEPTEC, which is the organization that represents OSATs. Here's another question. If you're a fabless and your conflict minerals submits you to, will you need to fill it? Yeah, basically, if you're up in the supply chain, you'll get the EICC GESI forms, and then you need to put those together to be able to supply that information to your upstream suppliers. The issue, again, is that the EICC GESI forms are supply chain oriented, and at some place the rubber has to meet the road because the SEC filings have to be on a product basis, not on a supply chain basis. So if you're a fabless company and you've got 100 products, some of them are in BGA packages, some are in QFNs, some are in MQFPs or whatever. If you have different levels of compliance, if one package is compliant because the chip and the package itself are conflict-free, but another one has a conflict, then you have to break that out in your reporting. And this is an area I think that's going to be one of the biggest stumbling blocks in the reporting for May 31st of this year. What's the difference between EICC template Rev 2.02 and 2.03a? 2.03a is the current one. Some software will accept 2.02. I mean, you can still use the 2.02. It's valid information. But if you want to use the latest one, it's 2.03a. Here's a question for Caprice.
will you be doing a webinar showing compliance for those who may sell modules or boards? Okay, well, modules and boards have a number of components, obviously. So it's no different than you selling, well, it's a bit different, but let me use an example. If you're an IC company and you're selling product to Apple, they're going to take those and put them together in, let's call a module. It may look like an iPhone 5 or whatever, but it's a module. If you're a company that is a fabless company that also does boards or modules, you would still have to file, if you're an SEC filer, you would have to file on whatever finished product you sell. So if one of your divisions sells ICs and the other division sells, let's say, boards that go into a computer, you would have to file on both of those. In one case, the products would be integrated circuits. In the other case, it would be a board, and you would have to account for the capacitors, the resistors, the ICs, the connectors, etc. on that product. So you get the best of both worlds, or the worst, depending on how you want to look at it. Okay, is there a benefit to determining you are conflict-free in year one versus stating conflict undeterminable? We've touched on this before. If you believe you, if you have an extremely complex situation, you may decide that the only thing you can do is file undeterminable. That being said, you need to understand the implications, and I've talked about them, so I won't go into great depth, but if your customers are okay with that, and if it's undeterminable, it's undeterminable. But realize that some of your customers may not be happy with that. If you do file undeterminable, you need to be really working toward trying to refine that. You can file first year and second year as undeterminable, or have products filed as undeterminable in year one and year two. But that excuse runs out in year three. The other thing is that you really need to start digging down into your supply chain, getting all of the relationships, et cetera, in place, putting the tracking in place, because it doesn't get any better as things expire, et cetera. You still have to do more and more work, even on things that you determined to be non-conflict free before. So you can get away with it, but just realize there's potential implications with your customers. Okay, I think that we'll take this as a last question maybe. If your smelters are completing the survey stating they are conflict-free, what else is required? I think if your smelters declare they're conflict-free, there's two things. First of all, it's going to be difficult to fly to Zimbabwe and check one of these things. Okay, so the tendency will be that if the smelter, if you're down at the smelter level and they say they're conflict-free, then that's, you probably need to accept that. If your smelters are someplace like in mainland China or whatever, that's a much more credible story than if your smelter possibly is in DRC but not on any kind of a list. So the physical presence of the smelter will add credibility or add questionability to the answer. There are groups, the Conflict-Free Smelter Initiative, groups that are working with smelters that do tantalum, tungsten, and tin to develop a conflict-free smelter list. And for tantalum, there's already a number of smelters on that list. So if your person that does, let's say, tungsten targets says that they're getting their tungsten from a smelter that's on the conflict-free list, then you're home free, because that's been declared to be legal. If it's not on a list or there's no list present, then you just have to make the decision of look at all the information and decide whether you believe it or not. So hopefully this ran, I think, a little bit long. Hopefully you learned something. If you have questions, don't hesitate to get a hold of me or to get a hold of the folks at Tensoft. And I appreciate your time. And I think Caprice is going to wrap up. Nope. Okay, I guess there'll be another one in January, and you'll get notified about that. So thank you all for listening, and let us know if we can be of assistance. Thank you very much.